Well, hello there, you're very welcome. We're going to take a look at the farming forecast for the next 4 weeks or so across the UK. It's all go at this time of the year, of course, with spring heading quite quickly on towards the summer season as well. We're going to start this week's farming forecast by looking at sugar beet drilling conditions at the moment. And on average, Fred showed this graph last week, of course, this is from BBRO. On average, the drilling date is around the 1st of April for most people, but it can vary quite a bit each year depending on the weather conditions that are prevalent. So some years it can be as early as mid-February, for example, as you can see on this graph, but in other years, depending on the weather, it can be as late as mid-May. So it does vary quite a bit depending on the soil conditions and the weather that are leading up to the beginning of spring. So we're going to take a look at the soil temperatures at the updates so far. As I say, Fred showed this graph last week. This is just an update on how it's looking now that we're heading to that 1st of April average date. Of course, it's only tomorrow. These are the 10 centimetre soil temperatures recorded at Marham in West Norfolk over the past several years or so. Now the thin red line, that's the average, the long-term average, encompassing the period 2002 to 2020. The thicker magenta line, that's what we've observed so far this year. And you can see for much of the winter itself for East Anglia was one of the mildest on record. It's in the top 5 for temperature on record. So a remarkably mild winter, and that has led to these soil temperatures at 10 centimetre depth at least being at or above average most of the time for most of the year so far. However, high pressure during the last week or so has led to frequent overnight frosts, and that has meant the soil temperatures have actually come down below average. In fact, they're quite notably below average right now. So the soils at depth are fairly chilly. Of course, sugar beet is drilled in the surface layers between sort of 3 and 5 centimetres, so not as deep as the 10 centimetres on this graph. And that sort of top layer of the soil will be more affected by the diurnal temperature range of the air above it. So I suspect probably not as chilly in the surface layers as it is down at depth. And of course the surface layers have dried out quite a bit. We had some very low relative humidities for many days last week under that brisk easterly wind, and so the surface layers have dried out quite a bit, but there's still quite a bit of moisture at depth as well. So this is how things are looking right now. We'll continue to monitor that over the next few weeks or so, but as I say, things have cooled off subsurface over the last few weeks or so. So looking forward at the forecast then, how are things going to change? Well, we've got high pressure in charge still. It's been centered over the Atlantic this week so far. The jet streams you can see on this graphic here well to the north for the time being. Not a lot of jet activity across the UK at all right now, so things are relatively settled. But over the next few days you'll notice a bit more of an active jet core coming out of Greenland, pushing down towards the northern half of the UK. That'll bring stronger winds, some rain and showers across Scotland in particular, just for a couple of days, and then towards the weekend the jet stream weakens and lifts back to the north again, allowing high pressure to build from the south. So a temporary blip, if you like, around sort of Thursday, and then things becoming a bit drier more widely again by the time we get through to Friday and the early part of the weekend. And we will see temperatures recovering as well, which should help those soil temperatures moving forward in time as well. So to take each day, day by day, there's that high pressure to the west of the UK. It was close to record breaking actually over the weekend for pressure recorded over the UK in the month of March. We saw the centre of that high well into the 1050 millibar range over the weekend as well. Still there, still dominating. Fairly slack conditions across most of the UK, a bit more breeze and cloud pushing into Scotland, and we have got a weather front sinking south through Wednesday into Thursday, which will bring cloud and some rain. The rain itself petering out as it moves further south, but still, generally speaking, pushing more cloud southwards across the British Isles over the next couple of days. And that'll bring a few spots of rain here and there, more especially in the west, whereas the further south and east drive with a bit of shelter, the cloud may break at times, and there's likely to be very little in the way of rain at all across a good part of England and Wales at least. Now Thursday will be quite a breezy day. You can see the isobars on there, so a blustery day for all of us, especially in the north, and there will be some wintry showers feeding into Scotland on that rather chilly northwesterly wind for the time of the year. Then looking beyond Thursday and into Friday, the high pressure slides eastwards across southern parts of the UK, and notice things become quite slack again by Friday, so the winds will ease out. There'll be quite a bit of dry weather on offer, still a weather front lurking close to western Scotland, so there'll be some rain here at times, but for the vast majority Friday will probably be a dry day, most of the showers dying away. But that does bring the threat of a little bit of frost here and there, because with lighter winds and clear skies that does allow those temperatures to dip away at night. It is still quite early on in the warmer season, if you like. And then towards the weekend, well, that high continues to nudge away off to the east over the nearby continents. It's still dry, still fairly settled on Saturday. The isobars are bunching together though through the weekend, and this time the wind's coming in from the south, so that'll bring warmer air with us, temperatures recovering through the weekend, and it'll also bring quite a bit of hazy sunshine, at least across England and Wales through the weekend. But you'll notice there will be some rain to be had across Western Scotland and Northern Ireland on late Saturday into Saturday night, and that will continue to track very slowly eastwards during Sunday, but the far east staying dry on Sunday as well. And in terms of temperatures, well, it's possible we could see high teens, even close to 20 degrees in one or two spots on Sunday afternoon in particular. So fairly mild conditions for the time of the year. The first weekend of April, 20 degrees, quite early on the season really, but still pretty warm in any sunny spells, despite the fact there will be quite a keen southerly wind. And wind is the key when it comes to spraying, of course, as well. A lot of you on the phone lines have been asking about spraying conditions in the last week or so. This is how things are looking as we go through this week. So the green shading here is the sort of ideal spraying conditions, if you like. So winds below 10 miles an hour and it's dry. For Wednesday, looking pretty good actually. A lot of green on the map there, so ideal spraying conditions for much of the UK away from Scotland. But as we go through Thursday with more wind around because of the isobars closing up together, there'll be less spraying opportunities, I think, during this time frame. It recovers again for Friday with the high pressure building back in, more green then showing back on the map. But then as the high drifts away off to the east and the isobars tighten again, so the potential for spraying becomes a bit more limited by Sunday and into the beginning of next week. So there will be some spraying opportunities to be had this week, but perhaps not several days in a row. It'll be a few days here and there with the odd sort of blip in between. But as I say, not a lot of rain this week. It's more of a blustery wind aspect that may hinder some spraying potential every now and again. So looking further ahead into the beginning of next week, and that weather front I talked about to the west of the UK on Sunday, that will continue to track its way east as we go into Monday. So expect cloud, expect outbreaks of rain to work their way across the UK for Monday as well. There'll be some rain around, but probably weakening quite a bit as it comes further east across the country. Ahead of it, we've still got that fairly warm air, so still potential for mid to high teens on Monday, depending on the timing of that front. Something a little bit cooler coming into the northwest and the west of the UK behind that weather front. And then what you'll notice is if you cast your eyes a little bit further down towards the Bay of Biscay, there's a hint of a ridge there, which may develop late Monday into Tuesday. So perhaps Tuesday might end up being a slightly dry day under this ridge, just depending on how things phase in time-wise. But the ridge will be temporary because it's likely that area of low pressure down near the Azores will then start pushing up with cloud and rain late Tuesday and overnight into Wednesday. Now the timing of this will probably change between now and then. It's still a week away or so, but in general we're going to get some wetter weather coming through at times next week, brief ridges in between before the next area of low pressure comes in as well. So it's more changeable next week, but not necessarily raining every day. There will be some drier days amongst the various areas of low pressure that come through up from the west or the southwest. And generally speaking, it's a mild direction. Most of this stuff will be coming up from the south or southwest. So temperatures will stay near or above average most of the week as well. And the frost risk will be somewhat limited to the far north of the UK most of the times as well. So to look at that in a little bit more detail, of course, we use Ensemble forecasting. We've talked about this many times on previous editions of the Farming Forecast. If you want to know more about how Ensemble forecasts are used, how we make them, then just click on the link at the top of this video and there's an explainer there explaining exactly what Ensemble forecasting is all about. Now this graphic here we haven't shown on the Farming Forecast before, but we use it internally, and essentially it's portraying the chance of a dry day for each day over the next 4 weeks. You can see along the top there each forecast day going along towards the right hand side, and then down the left hand side just a random selection of different counties in the UK. Most of them are in England and Wales, admittedly. This hasn't been chosen deliberately for this video. This was a product we already make elsewhere, so we're just utilising the tools we already have. But you can clearly see when days are dry versus wet. So the idea being that where all the ensemble members cluster together, there's high confidence that a certain event will happen. And in this case, if it's a high chance of it being dry, you'd likely see an H or a VH, high or very high, showing up in the table here. And if the members are clustering towards the wetter end of the spectrum, in other words, it's more likely to rain, then you would expect an L or a VL, low or very low chance of it being dry. So the brown is where things are looking ideal for a dry day, and the greens sort of indicate that it's more likely to rain than be dry on that particular day in that particular county. And you can quite clearly see here, for much of this work week, it's dry. There's a lot of brown on the map, not a lot of rain to be had really through this week, the exceptions being perhaps the northwest of England, parts of Wales as well, where on summer days, particularly Thursday for example, there are some Ls and VLs showing up, which is where that weak weather front will drift south and may give a little bit of light rain, but no massive amounts of rain, it has to be said. And then there is a flip. You can see a flip in the pattern by the time we get through to Sunday, where we start to get more green colours showing up, particularly across western parts of the UK, which just indicates those Atlantic fronts starting to come in, perhaps late on in the day, particularly late Sunday night, and they will track east into Monday. So even on Sunday, still the east region, Norfolk, Suffolk, etc., still coming up with likely to be quite dry. But by Monday, we're all pretty much in the green scenario, and really from Monday through most of next week, it fluctuates day to day, and the further out in time you go, the bigger the spread, so the less confident you are in one particular weather type dominating. But in general, there is a trend there for a week or so from Monday of a more changeable pattern with a greater chance of rain on some of the days. Not necessarily all of the days, but some of the days. And it's quite clear that Monday has a fairly high chance of rain in quite a few areas as that front crosses. Perhaps slightly lower risk on Tuesday, is sort of less green if you like, and then a return to something a bit wetter potentially on Wednesday showing up, but subject to change at this sort of range. And then later on in the sequence, towards mid-month, sometime around the 14th or 15th, there's another sort of flip in the colour scale used here, kind of indicating that perhaps from mid-month onwards, high pressure may become more established again across southern areas, and so a better chance of dry weather re-establishing across central and southern Britain. Notice the signal's not quite as strong across the likes of Scotland and Wales on this graphic here, and so more likely perhaps to stay unsettled here through the rest of the month. But in general, high pressure may rebuild across southern parts of the UK from mid-April onwards. We'll have to see, still a long way away, but just trends showing up in the data at the moment. So that sort of information is available on our Weatherquest portal. If you're trying to get out and do spraying or drilled sugar beet, for example, there's plenty of information on the Weatherquest portal, including that spraying index I showed you, but for your site-specific location. All of that, plus the monthly forecast, this video, but in much more detail in text form. We've also got jet stream images with forecaster commentary on there, and all sorts of other goodies on there as well. Now, usually you get a free 7-day trial, but because it's the beginning of the season for many farmers and growers, we are actually offering a free 28-day trial. So if you are interested in trying out the Weatherquest portal, just send us an email to info@weatherquest.co.uk and we'll send you details and create you a login and show you what we have to offer there. So here's how we're looking across Europe for week 2 now. This is spanning from the 6th to the 12th of April. And you can see blue shading there to the west of the UK, that's where pressure is lower than normal, and the reds covering much of Europe, that's where pressure is higher than normal. So the net flow between these areas of low and high pressure is a very mild southwesterly one, at least across central and western Europe, bringing in warm air up from the south. It could be quite warm at times actually through this spell across this part of the world. Colder than average though, north of the storm tracks across Iceland you'll notice, and with low pressure close by and a fairly mild southwesterly flow, it will be wet at times across the UK and indeed northern and western Europe, with above average rainfall generally signalled here, drier than normal conditions though prevailing across southern and southeastern parts of Europe. And then towards mid-April, well, there are signs, fairly weak signals it has to be said, but signs that high pressure may continue to lurk close to the south or southwest of the UK. Much of Europe though not really having a particularly strong pressure pattern displaying at the moment. That means confidence a little bit lower than normal perhaps in what may occur during mid-April. In general, temperatures are forecast to be near or slightly above average, and in terms of rainfall it could be still a little bit above average perhaps across parts of the UK, but trending to near normal, drier than average across Spain and perhaps also some other southern parts of Europe as well. And then the trend towards mid-April onwards, so this is sort of after mid-April, there's that high pressure trend at least building across southern parts of the UK. Low pressure though still closer to the northwest of the UK could give us some rain here and some strong winds at times, which may occasionally push further south, but overall it's more likely that we'll get several dry days and fewer wetter days across southern parts of the UK, at least through the latter stages of April. And in terms of temperatures, it's looking like at the moment at least near or slightly above average, although there will be a return to frosty nights if the high pressure does occur, but potentially quite large diurnal ranges between the minimum temperatures in the morning and the warm afternoon temperatures that we may get. So quite a big swing between the nights and the days in terms of temperatures perhaps observed. And at the moment, rainfall currently showing below average across a good chunk of the UK, away from that far northwest corner where we like to see some fairly wet weather at times, with some brisk winds potentially as well. So just to summarise what may be happening over the next 4 weeks or so, it's looking largely dry through the rest of this week, away from the north and northwest, and perhaps the far west, where we may see some rain at times. But in general, rain amounts are pretty small this week away from western Scotland. Becoming warmer as we go through the weekend, and that's ahead of that sort of pattern change to something a bit more changeable for next week. But there'll be some dry days amongst the wetter days. It's not going to be raining every day, everywhere, so just a little bit wetter at times through next week. And then perhaps becoming a little bit more settled towards mid-April onwards, more especially across southern parts of the UK, and less likely the further north you are, where there may be a continuation of the unsettled thing. But it has to be said, COVID-19 is also having an impact on forecasting ability, because the amount of aircraft that are now grounded and no longer taking measurements, which we usually rely on, that feed into our models, means we've got less data going into the beginning of the forecast, and ultimately that may have an impact on the accuracy of the forecast looking further ahead in time. So it's possible what's showing up now for mid to late April may not necessarily be the path we end up going down in terms of the weather forecast at least, but we'll have to see. Just something to bear in mind, that perhaps confidence is a little bit lower than normal now, given the current situation going on around the world. So that's how things are looking for the next 3-4 weeks or so. As ever, you can keep up to date with the latest day-by-day forecast by following us on our social media channels, and of course you can keep up to date with our East Anglia podcast every day on our website. Bye for now.